what would the Iron Range look like with a thriving copper, nickel, and iron mining industry? Because I personally think, I think Northeast Minnesota would turn into the fastest growing region in the state overnight.
Yeah, that's it's a good question on its own. It's even a better question with what's going on in the coronavirus world we're living in right now, because the idea of having a strong range with thriving existing iron ore operations, adding 3, 4, or 5 copper, nickel, precious metal mining operations, what that would do to this, not only the direct impact, but the supplier vendor community and strong and healthy communities and schools. Yeah, we would be a region like I saw growing up in the 70s that was booming. Now, again, everyone says, well, mining is boom and bust. It is. All industries are. Look, banking industry, airline industry, retail, tourism might be bust this year with the coronavirus. So with the coronavirus, I see three themes, because out of every crisis comes opportunity, correct? For everybody.
Oh, yeah.
And from a mining perspective, broadly, we have the ability to demonstrate that mining, being an essential manufacturing sector, can continue to keep an economy going, drive an economy with the jobs and the supplier vendors that supply it. And that's proving very essential right now to the whole state and especially our region. 2, it draws the highlight, as you referenced, toward the need to have the supply chain right here. We have the metals. We're dependent on countries like China and the Congo, and we need to have fair trade metals. We're import dependent on all of them. We need them. We're seeing that exacerbated from a problematic standpoint right now with the coronavirus, not just mining, but healthcare, manufacturing, computer chips, everything. We have the ability to say, hey, let's mine here first. President Trump came out with the executive order last week that said, we're going to mine the moon. Well, that's fantastic, but let's mine Minnesota first.
Yeah,
let's mine the United States. And so those are 2 very big points. And you add on top of that the acute attention to this serious issue in front of us right now, and what's proving to be antimicrobial effective, the properties of what? Copper. Copper kills the coronavirus. Nickel you need for stainless steel for all the healthcare industry. The demand is there. The demand is going to keep growing. We have another thing to add to the green economy, need the metals, healthcare, make it safe for everybody. Copper, copper, copper. We have it. Let's mine it here.
Yeah, I agree. And then overall too, when you look at it, and you and I, we could go all day talking about this too, just all the benefits of it. But just from a morality standpoint, we have the labor laws here, strict labor regulations, and then also from an environmental perspective, it almost gets to a point where it's counterproductive with some of the regulations that are going on, because it's forcing other companies to go to other countries that don't have as strict environmental regulations, which ends up polluting the environment as a whole overall in the world. And it's kind of counterproductive, basically.
Well, it goes to the whole adage, think globally, act locally. Well, in this case, it's important for mineral development. We're in a global economy. We need these metals. Why do them in China or India, where they don't have environmental controls that are polluting the planet that we live in right here, and killing teenagers working every week in the cobalt mines with their hands, with no safety requirements? We have the responsibility to do it here, both from a moral standpoint and, as your organization is appropriately named, better in our backyard. And it all plays into that. on any given occasion. Anything less is hypocritical.
Yeah, I agree. So I think this is kind of this conversation is a good segue to, to some of the questions. So like just simple, Frank, where are you from?
I am born and raised in Hibbing, Minnesota. Proud Blue Jacket.
Nice. So sorry, are you living up there now, or are you living in Duluth?
I'm in Duluth. Duluth is kind of a, if you will, the hub for northeastern Minnesota industry, and the area where the media pays attention, where there's the ability to be going on any given day, driving up to the range, or more likely the 2-hour drive down to St. Paul for whatever activities down there, where all the people who affect our lives and control our regulations and our legislation spend their time. So it's proven to be a good hub.
Okay. So as the executive director of Mining Minnesota, what's your role on a day-to-day basis?
Chief cook and bottle washer.
Oh yeah.
No, Mining Minnesota exists to help bring the next generation of mining to Minnesota. We work every day to let people know that we have the ability to have modern, environmentally responsible development of copper, nickel, and precious metals right here in Minnesota. And we work through public information, governmental relations, regulatory affairs constantly to help keep the playing field level. So these companies that are investing hundreds of millions of dollars from around the globe into our state to look at mineral development of these metals have a level playing field to demonstrate their project.
Okay. So where did the idea originate to create Mining Minnesota? How did that all start?
Yeah, interesting story. Prior to Mining Minnesota, I served as president of the Iron Mining Association. And, after the turn of the millennium, when you were just a wee lad, we wondered then, were we going to have an iron ore industry in the state of Minnesota? 2001, 2002, LTV went bankrupt and shut down. National Steel Pellet Company was bankrupt. The current Keetac shut down. Evelyn Mines, now United Taconite, shut down. Hibbing Tac was down for months. I mean, we wondered if we were going to have an iron ore industry. And right about that same time, as we struggled to survive, a couple of the copper nickel development companies started coming on to the scene in Minnesota. PolyMet, Teck, and Ernie Lehman with his Franconia Minerals. And they were all around looking at what the regulatory environment looked like and being active participants in the Iron Mining Association, but realized, we have some of our own needs that the iron ore companies as operators are worried about survival and cost and efficiencies. We need to focus on the regulatory environment and what it's going to take to get through environmental review and permitting. And collectively, they decided they needed their own organization. So they put together, the companies that were investing in Minnesota, some additional supplier vendors, and created the entity that's now known as Mining Minnesota. And at the end of 2006, came to me and said, come on and run it for us. And for better or worse, I chose to do that. And ever since, we've been battling to get companies across the finish line and get these projects permitted as they go forward.
So one thing that's always been curious to me, and I've asked this to other leaders in the area though too, and but when these organizations and companies came together to you and to form this, did they foresee that it would take this long to get through the regulatory process and the permitting process? I mean, did they think that it would take, over 14 years to even get close to build,
hell no.
Yeah, North Met.
No, now everyone, don't get me wrong. Everyone recognized it would take years
Yep.
for any company to go through environmental review, to go through permitting, and all the hearings and comment periods and modeling and testing and development and everything that goes into that. But nobody thought it'd be 14 years,
Okay.
essentially, for, PolyMet, the first one that, entered the process to become a fully permitted operation. Keep in mind, PolyMet demonstrated that you can successfully permit a base, copper, nickel, precious metal, platinum, palladium, cobalt, gold mine in the state of Minnesota. Obviously, some of those permits are held up in court.
Yep.
But the fact that they went through the process, had an environmental impact statement that was deemed adequate, went through permitting, and received all their major permits, that's important to remember, that Minnesota can be open for business. And that's a message that gets sent globally to the investment community. That's a positive thing. Obviously, the litigation, not so positive. But, that's kind of the thought. But no, nobody thought it would take as long as it has taken.
Okay. So is that, one, and I think this is kind of an obvious question, but so I think, to me, the hope is that once PolyMet's up and running, once they're under construction, once they prove for a couple of years that, they can be safe to the environment, that they're not as much of a risk as many portray them to be. Do you see the process getting faster, where instead of 10 to 15 years, like for example, like me with Twin Metals Minnesota, I mean, if somebody told me that it wouldn't get going until 2030, I wouldn't be surprised. Once PolyMet's up and running, do you see the process being faster?
The word faster, I guess, is the question.
Or leaner or more efficient?
Yeah. What I see is PolyMet getting up and running. Keep in mind that once they break ground, it's going to take 2 years for them to, they got to spend $1 billion capitalizing that project, refurbishing everything, open blasting, stripping, opening the mine, refurbishing crushers, new concentrators, you name it, new flotation, which will be tremendous boom for the region. But once they get up and running and demonstrate that, like their permit says, they are able to meet all the standards and requirements we have in the state, just like the Eagle Mine is demonstrating now in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, right off Lake Superior and Marquette. That will help certainly with the mining is mining mindset, as opposed to iron ore versus copper nickel. But every company that proposes a project is going to be a separate project, a separate venue. They all have unique ore bodies, similar, fortunately, in being sulfur deficient. But it'll take years. But yes, we can hope the agencies have learned a lot, and I believe they have, from the PolyMet project, going through the process as far as analysis, testing, modeling, essentially risk management. What do you have to do? How long should it take? Put some timelines on, assess it, assess the risk, make a decision, and keep moving. So I hope we can shave years off this second project. Yeah. And I hope a third project and a fourth project come along well before Twin Metals is too many years down the road into environmental review, because the other companies certainly have the ability to do that if they feel the mineralization and the regulatory environment is positive to go along with the global demand and price of the commodities at any given time. It can happen here. The opportunity is fantastic.
So one thing that I've wondered for the past year is, why was Eagle Mine so much quicker in getting their permits? I know it's a different state, but
yeah, Michigan, I want to say the Eagle Mine still took 9-10 years. If don't hold me to specific numbers, but if I think back, by the from project proposal to permit, and when they proposed their project, the state of Michigan, Department of Environmental Quality had just gone through some legislative reforms on mineral issues. And so they were operating under some new laws. They have their final designation states. So for their water wells and infusion and other things, they didn't need EPA approval, just their state approval. That probably helped them with some timelines and ability to move some things more quickly. But it still took them 9 years, maybe 10. I look at the Rainy River Gold, which is a gold operation that just opened literally right across the border in Canada.
Yeah, I don't know
about
much about that.
40 miles north of the border in the Rainy River watershed. A little further, west of International Falls and I guess east of Baudette. So, between Lake of the Woods and International Falls, kind of right in the middle there. And it took them in Canada, better part of 8-9 years by the time they were start to finish. So it takes years. Even in Canada, which is moving mineral development projects forward and always has and continues to do so in a very proactive way. Okay.
So would you say that Canada is more efficient than the US right now currently on getting projects moving forward? I've heard that from a couple colleagues where, and they're very generic comments, so I can't say that it's like, I can't be any specific on it, but I've just heard from some engineers in the area where they're just saying Canada is just better.
Simple answer, yes. Certain provinces are, have significant economic impact from mining. Ontario, just north of us, is certainly one of them, and they recognize the importance of that economic impact and mining, and have been very supportive, all things considered, of responsible development in their provinces.
Okay, cool. So, this is kind of going back to PolyMet and even twin metals. So let's say in a perfect day or whatever today, or perfect environment, PolyMet was going through and they're past the construction phase, and they have miners going, they're getting copper, and how does that positively affect not only the Iron Range, but how would that affect Duluth in a positive way economically, do you think?
Sure. Keep in mind that right now the existing iron ore industry is, $3.5 billion economic impact to this region. St. Louis County, Duluth, the Range, Itasca County, the North Shore, Douglas County in Wisconsin. And we all know that the benefit of that to the supplier vendor community and the communities and the tax dollars and everything else. And that's 30% of the regional's gross domestic product, the largest single sector, to more than the next two industries combined of timber and tourism. And copper nickel mining, based on economic impact studies at the University of Minnesota Duluth campus Labovitz School of Economics, have shown that we have the opportunity to double the size of the existing industry with just the proposals, PolyMet, Twin Metals, Teck, Encampment, Talon, that the potential for copper nickel development is that vast to double the size of the existing industry, in billions of dollars of capital investment, thousands and thousands of new, almost $100,000 a year now on average, a mining job is, compared to, the average 40,000, 45, 50 in the state of Minnesota, tourism 18, 20,000. So the economic impact and the opportunity is phenomenal. So what that would mean to the region is the people would be coming, the money would be being spent, and it's all global investment coming here because we have the metals and demand is not going away.
Well, I think that's a great point though too, especially when you're talking about the regional economy, because before I lived in Duluth, I lived in East Grand Forks, and I was going to college at UND, and I noticed that wages were rising pretty steadily in Grand Forks, and I had a job. I think I was making $10 an hour, and one day I looked at my pay stub a couple months after I started work, and they upped my pay to $12 an hour, and I worked at a warehouse, and the reason why they upped it to $12 an hour, I asked my boss because I didn't even ask for it. He said, "Well, we've been losing a lot of people to to Minot to Williston to the oil fields. It was
Yep.
just near. It was just before the end of the oil boom in North Dakota, and that's why they were upping it. And when I moved here, I just, after working at Parsons Electric for a bit, going up to the mines, I visited PolyMet. That was the first I learned about PolyMet is I was going there for a project estimate. We were updating inflation and material pricing changes, and this is when they thought that PolyMet, the construction of it, would be coming sooner. So every couple of years they had to go back up there and update their estimates.
Right. Yep.
And I was lucky enough to come in, and then when I actually learned about the iron mining industry and the effects that it had, and like we were saying, the average wages that they're making, and then being in Duluth, and then just seeing people very much against mining, having a negative opinion on mining, really them not understanding that if mining is flourishing on the range, whether they get in the mining industry or not, or even in construction, their wages are going to get better. It may not be right away, but within the next couple of years, they will rise because companies have to compete to keep you.
Yeah, and you asked about the whole region, and you specifically referenced Duluth, and I gave you numbers that were based on the whole region, but all you have to do is look at Duluth. I mean, Duluth is an industry town.
Yep.
You come into Duluth, you see the railroad tracks, you see the docks, you see the piles of iron ore in the yards at Canadian National, and you see the big boats. People come to see the big boats. What do they haul? They haul, grains, they haul taconite pellets, they haul coal, and that's money, people. That's hundreds of millions of dollars of economic impact. And without mining, there would be a significant loss of jobs in Duluth and all the related industries from healthcare to tourism on down.